my sister's dream come true that I can get to talk through this microphone because it's really fancy. It still does that. I'm kind of disappointed. But okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to tonight. Many thoughts will be offered, and I hope that you come with an open and sharp mind and heart. My name is Hodan, and I just want to give a special welcome to all the queer people in the room, all the non-binary people, all the gender non-conforming people, all the gay people, all the femmes, and all the men. Especially those of color, especially those who are black. It is not an easy place for us to be tonight here in the Tropen Museum. We are not meant to talk back or think back or so this is work that we're doing. This is work that we're doing for our own sakes. This is work that we are doing because we want change and justice, and because we are looking for different ways to relate to one another. And then it is good and necessary to look back at the place where we are, in our relationships, in our societies, and to look back at the place and the places that have played such a big role in creating Dutch society as it is. Because the Tropen Museum is a colonial museum. It's a place that was very crucial to Dutch colonialism. And Dutch colonialism, just as any other type of modern European colonialism, was very much engaged in the categorization and the study of Black and indigenous peoples and their cultures, and creating categories and dichotomies, opposites, and hierarchies in order to legitimize violence. And so, tonight is a program filled with the voices of queer and feminine voices of people of color and black people that will offer, in an experimental way, their thoughts about specifically how places like this created ideas about gender and sexuality, projected those ideas onto the bodies of Black and indigenous peoples around the world, and they're going to think about what have those ideas done to our own understandings of ourselves and the understandings that are alive in the world that shape our lives. So I'm very happy that tonight is happening. I'm very happy that these people have committed to being here and sharing their thoughts with us. This event is a part of the Engendered series of lectures and events where we delve into and rewrite the multiple meanings and roles of gender in the collections of the Tropen Museum and the other museums that are part of the Museum for World Cultures. One of the main questions in these series are, what does it mean for a museum to sidestep its own body of knowledge and rethink how these concepts are constructed within the institution? And how can thinkers, activists, and artists question, rethink, and rewrite the notion of gender, body, politics, and sexuality, and its relation to patriarchy in contemporary society? So also my job is to tell you that you can't eat while you're sitting here and listening. That's very important. Also, don't drink. Just hold it all in. Hold it for afterwards. If you want to join the conversation, there are specific moments where I will ask for you to join the conversation, but also online you can join the conversation all throughout the evening using the hashtag bodypolitics. Also, if you feel that you would like to do more thinking and talking about these topics, about how to undo and rethink all the categories that we're saddled up with because of our history, then you can also email the lovely people that are organizing these talks and lectures because there's going to be a declassification workshop happening, and I will give you the email address for that later. So keep that in mind also. Let me introduce Wayne Modest as our first speaker. He is the head of the Research Center of Material Culture, who hosts these events and is a big part of the big Museum for World Cultures, and he will welcome you in his own way as well. Wayne. There he is.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks, Hodan. My role is actually quite small because Hodan already explained exactly what we are going to do tonight, and so I work at that center place, the Research Center for Material Culture, which is one of the departments of the National Museum, and the National Museum comprises now 3 museums: Tropa Museum, Museum Folkakunda, and Africa Museum in Bergendal, and we work very closely with the museum, the World Museum in Rotterdam. Now, one of the things that we've been trying to do recently is to try to, following along what Hodan said, is to try to see the ways in which we are implicated, intricately bound up, complicit in the kinds of colonial project and its afterlife in the present. And to try and understand what that complicity means, we're also trying to see what role we have in undoing that kind of complicity. A part of that is not only this program. We have an ongoing program which is around rethinking colonialism and its afterlife, and there's an exhibition above here which is on slavery's afterlife in the present, and we invite the public to come and think with us simply whether or not the exhibition is good enough, and more so, what can we do differently in the future to put this event, put this topic on the agenda. But more than that, though, we realized that the colonial project was not just a project that only classified questions of race and racism and racial hierarchies, but it also had a certain way of, which we don't normally think about. Tonight we're thinking about how that racialized classification is also implicated in questions of gender and gender normativities. Because whenever I say to people that ethnographic museums are very male spaces, they say, what do you mean? I say most of the collectors were men. They say, no, that is not true. Women also collected. I say, what did they collect? And then they give me the exact thing that I want them to tell me. They say textiles. Women collect textiles. Whereas we know that the men stood on elephants with guns and they collected, and most of them came from that. But we wanted to rethink more than that, though, because we have been a part of eliding the fact that if one were to think gender norms within the Indonesian context, you could have 4 gender categories. But that has never been a part of our representational practice, because that is not how we represented. But we also take this discussion even further. And with gender, sexuality, questions of colonialism, we also have a series looking at planetary histories to try and ask the question, how are we also implicated as these kinds of cultural institutions in the catastrophe that we now fear in relationship to the future of the earth. And I give you one small example and then I go. If you look in our photographic collections, then you see a lot of wonderful photographs from when we were improving the colonies. And by that it meant deforestation, and it ties onto technological improvements, trains, those kinds of things. But we never really mapped that onto the question of what actually we did to land and the future. So in that regard, what we're thinking is that project of decolonizing is a project that is multiply mapped onto the precarity of several different groups that are represented here. And that is the work that we need to do in our museum. So I want to welcome you to be a part of the conversation. But I want to also say that this is an ongoing conversation, and that this welcome is open for you to come back to think with us again and again as we try to decolonize, if you want to use that word, but as we try to unravel some of our own implicatedness in the world that we live in and try to help to fashion a more hopeful, better world where equality is a horizon. Thank you, and enjoy the evening.
Before we continue with the evening, I'm so glad to see so many of you, even there. I'm so happy that you're here. Hey, beautiful persons. Just wanted to say that unfortunately, Leal Fatuni couldn't join us because she's not feeling well tonight, and Ainuk Tan can also not join us tonight because of family circumstances. So the program is going to be a little bit different, but nonetheless very, very interesting, of course. Zinzi Mainot will not be doing a performance as was announced, but more of a talk. So just keep that in mind when she is announced. Let's continue.
This poem is about value and violence. It echoes the voices of Maria Kopenwichler, Milone Rijgman, Amal Alhag, Simone Legrand, Octavia Butler, Jay Gossett, Eva Hayward, Toni Morrison, Hortense Spillers, Alok Veetmanon, Maya Binyan, Darian L. Williamson, Tishu Cole, Grada Kilomba, Erica Badu, Madlib, Susan Laystar, Edouard Glisson, Kamaya Devstar, Moore Mother, Fred Moten, Erica Shields, Lyndon Barrett, M. Nurbese Philip. We just made ourselves invisible. We neglected to disclose the seed of our indifference. We neglected to disclose the fact of our indifference altogether. We ghosted you a long time ago. We ain't dead, said the children, don't believe it. We just made ourselves invisible. Part 2. You and me do not haunt this place. It is haunted by itself, by its own history, its own histories and horrors. Unspeakable and going unspoken is its whiteness. Whiteness as privilege, whiteness as superiority, whiteness as terror. What is the corporeality of whiteness? What is the white body and what is it not? What is white embodiment? What is the whiteness of corporeality? This contradiction, an object of exotic assumptions, an object of knowledge, an object of data collection, an object of science, an object of logistics, an object of value extraction, an object of trade, an object of property, an object of containment, an object of incarceration, an object of violence, an object of death. Here, J. Gossett whisper, we refuse the knowability of the human subject. We refuse that everything is under enlightenment, regimes of knowledge and power. The knowable human subject is a part of a colonial racial project that makes everything an object and every person a thing. As much as this place obsesses with the universality of its knowledge, you and me and they can find a lot in tracing its blind spots, tracing what was never collected, tracing what never entered the archive, tracing what was not worthy of white curiosity. White disinterest speaks volumes about whiteness. This place was founded in 1864 as the Colonial Institute with the goal to promote colonialism. In 1889, an exhibition is organized with the title Wit over Zwart, beelden van zwarten in de westerse populaire cultuur. In the small booklet which accompanied the exhibition, you and me read. Enslaved persons were the most important commodities that the Europeans extracted from Africa. Slavery and the slave trade formed one of the cornerstones of the wealth of cities such as Amsterdam, Middelburg, Bordeaux, Nantes, Liverpool, or London. Yet there's little original image materials existing on the slave trade in the 16th and 17th century. It was about trade, numbers, and quantities, not about humans. Also, this interest is precise. Also, this interest is part of the regimes of knowledge and power. You and me and they hear Hortense Miller's whisper. The European males who loaded and captained these galleys and who policed and corralled these human beings in hundreds of vessels from Liverpool to Elmina to Jamaica, from the Cayenne Islands to the ports at Charleston and Salem, and for 3 centuries of human life, they were not curious about this cargo that bled, packed like so many live sardines among the immovable objects. Such inveterate, obscene blindness might be denied point blank as a possibility for anyone, except that we know it happened. Inveterate, obscene, blindness. This blindness seizes the captive body, violently makes it abstract, extracts numbers from it, capital, profit, quantifies it through the use of force. This is a poem about violence and value. The disinterest in a living captive body is contrasted with an obsession with measuring it, measuring non-white bodies, alive or dead, measuring bones and skulls, particularly measuring skulls. This is a poem about violence and value. Fetish bones, fetish skulls, taxonomy, fetish. Scientists, come down with your scales up. Get baptized in the ocean of the hungry. Reject what white hands amassed here as knowledge. Reject the forced visibility, the forced knowability. Reject the numbers white hands extracted from bodies through the use of force. Reject the white numbers as anything relevant to know about anyone. To measure is to not know. Hear Milone Reichmann whisper. My name is Sarah Bartman. You know everything about my body. You know nothing about my loss. Get baptized in the ocean of the people. You and me and they and we have taken the right to opacity a long time ago. You and me and they have always already had the right to opacity. We were never here. You and me ghosted this place a long time ago. Part 1.
was a poem by Maria Guggenbichler, who you have not seen yet, but she is here. The poem is called We Ghosted This Place. We're gonna welcome Murat on stage. There he is. Murat, I didn't forget about you. I was just confused. I just whispered for 20 minutes. Please come onto the stage. I know of you because Sophia's my friend. Yeah. Okay, so Murat Aydemir is an associate professor at the UvA, at the University of Amsterdam, in literary and cultural analysis. Take it away, Murat.
Thank you. I was worried for a moment, but only for a moment. Many thanks to Amal Al-Haag for inviting me. It's super cool to be here. Where is Amal? There. Thank you very much. I want to start my talk by bringing into mind a very common convention in academic and other forms of writing by activists, NGOs, maybe also corporations, certainly also governments. Namely, when as a kind of shorthand, we list a series of identities followed by a quick etc. As in class, race, gender, sexuality, able-bodiedness, etc. Usually, and unlike in my own attempt here, a very lame attempt, we try very hard to make these listings exhaustive and all-inclusive. But just to be sure, we also add the requisite etc. to close off the list. Now, there may be a couple of things going on with this convention. To begin, and of course, a very sincere acknowledgement of difference and pluralism. So that's the good part. Sometimes it's also a little bit of a boast. See how long and how up-to-date my list is, longer and more up-to-date than yours. Sometimes you can almost sense an element of fear. I may have forgotten someone, they may come for me, so better say etc. so I'm covered. And finally, at its worst, it's a cynical strategy. If I just first mention everyone, I may get away with talking about only one thing, my thing, in the remainder of the piece, and forget all about intersectionality. Now, that being as it may, I want to reflect a little bit longer on the picture of identity and difference that such listings promote. On the one hand, the items on the list are all offered up as entirely discrete entities, as separate formations. And on the other, the lists present those entities as so many variables located on a single plane or a single grid. And the combined impression is that identities are, of course, all different, but are nonetheless comparable, discrete, but equivalent, like items on a menu, or tick boxes on a form, or crayons in a box, or avatars in a game. And in this way, I would argue that the list turns difference into a pacified, transparent, and controllable diversity that's very much beloved by marketers and managers. Indeed, the elegant bureaucratic form of the list conceals the historical violence that went into its composition, as well as the contemporary violence that goes into its continuous upkeep and adaptation. Of course, what we call identities are not tags, they're not labels. They are the violent products of distinct material histories, all forged in the cauldron of colonialism, capitalism, and biopower, of which this institution was such a great part. And those large-scale and entangled histories cannot be captured by the restrained economy of the list. They simply don't fit. Moreover, the list turns into a static diorama or a tableau what are actually ongoing developments. Much like a shark, power is always on the move. And what seems like a more or less established list from one perspective may reveal itself as particularly volatile and unpredictable terrain from another. Identities are continuously enforced and adapted, distributed and redistributed. Some identities are violently segregated, while others are precisely forcibly conflated or reduced to each other. Now, at present, for instance, witness the frantic ideological efforts coming from the left as much as from the right to disarticulate the lived intersectionality of class and race. Of course, when someone now addresses class or the working class, they frequently deploy this as a dog whistle for white. Class now means, for many people, white. And in what seems like a very colonial strategy, I almost hesitate to say neo-colonial, it's just colonial. The colonial strategy of divide and conquer, a racialized subject of diversity, so-called diversity, is increasingly segregated from a nominally white subject of class, no doubt trying to prevent coalition building on the basis of shared interests. Another way of saying, while not quite saying white next to class, can be sexuality. Case in point, the leveraging of a nominally white and progressive sexuality over Muslim immigrants and their descendants. What's happening? It's right from my nose. Okay, that's better.
Yeah.
Thank you. Shall I start over? I have time. Where was I? Let's start again with the paragraph. Now, another way of saying white while not quite saying white, it is better. Yeah, while not saying white, next to class, can be sexuality. Case in point, the leveraging of a nominally white and progressive sexuality, supposedly progressive sexuality over Muslim immigrants and their descendants, a strategy that Jasbir Puar has termed homonationalism. Homonationalism requires two steps. To begin, the reduction of a wide range of ethnic, religious, national, class, and other differences to the singular life form, quote unquote, of the racialized Muslim. So Kurdish or Turkish, Amazigh or Arabic, Alevi or Sunni, that all doesn't matter anymore, although differences drop away in the constitution of a racial Muslim other. So in this case, power doesn't work by segregating, as it does in the cases of class and diversity, as well as sexuality and race, but precisely by conflating, by denying difference, another reality that the convention of the diversity listing conceals. In what Puar describes as the fissuring of race from sexuality, moreover, separate domains of identity are parceled out. While the sexual other is paradigmatically assumed to be white, the racial other is usually taken to be straight, and not just straight, but also actively homophobic to boot. And in this way, Puar argues, homonationalism produces a supposedly exceptional national liberal sexuality, which helps to facilitate the increasing, if qualified and opportunistic, inclusion of some lesbian and gay citizens in the body politic at the cost of excluding racial and class others. Now, for a prime example of how fundamentally and absurdly the relation between sex and race can be denied, I want to take you back to a moment in recent Dutch history so vile, it might as well require a trigger warning. And the year is 2005, and the anti-immigration and anti-Islam politician Rita Verdonk, remember her, serves as Secretary of Immigration and Integration. She is installed at the Justice Department, so Immigration and Integration, at the Justice Department, rather than the Ministry of the Interior, where you would expect her to be. Of course, that fact alone speaks volumes about the criminalization and securitization of migrant minorities in the Netherlands. So, while Verdonk is busy being all anti-Islam and anti-immigration at the Justice Department, news stories about a number of executions of gay men in Iran prompt the COC, which then happened to be led by a political ally of Verdonk. So she had a friend at the COC, ironically, to petition her to grant asylum to gay refugees from the country. Verdonk, caught in a perfect double bind between her anti-asylum and homo-nationalist instincts, she first stalled and dithered for a bit, tried to go for time, but then finally instituted a special group policy for gay Iranian refugees. And this is the first move towards the policy that's now in place, where people have to prove that they are gay for skeptical IND operatives who are sort of, prove it. Where do you start? Where do you end? Now, the story puts the logic of homonationalism in sharp relief, and I would say the racial, colonial logic of homonationalism in sharp relief, because it demonstrates that the immigrant Muslim and the gay asylum seeker from Iran, who we might innocently expect to have quite a lot in common, are in fact pushed into entirely different universes. So, on the one hand, the Dutch Islamic immigrants, who have been living in the country for over 3 generations now, are all corralled into a form of conditional citizenship on the basis of their religion, their culture, their ethnicity, their sexual morals, their homophobia, quote unquote, all of which together amounting to their racialization. And on the other hand, people from Iran who happen to identify as gay were, at least for that particular moment, briefly, actively welcomed to the Netherlands. As if by some magical process of transubstantiation, just by being gay, they instantly stopped being Muslim and stopped being Iranian, and in a way became already Dutch, already fully integrated and assimilated. In other words, the sexuality of the Iranian asylum seeker makes him already Western, already modern, already white, and already Dutch. And meanwhile, the imposed raciality of the Muslim immigrant ensures he will never be quite Western, quite modern, quite white, and quite Dutch enough. Of course, there's a long history to the contemporary homo-nationalist casting of people in opposite roles. The strategy exploits the entanglement of colonialism and biopower in the latter half of the 19th century, the time when different human forms of life were invented, formalized, enforced, and exported across the globe. The formula then was perhaps deceptively simple: sex for the West, race for the rest. And because sexual difference was already reserved for the West, while racial difference was delegated to the colonies, the two were not on an even footing from the start, today allowing for this quasi-liberal, quasi-progressive exploitation of the distinction between the two, where sex can be seen as white and race is always brown or black. Now, colonial and biopolitical distinctions among human lives haunt us to today, and in that regard, we haven't escaped from the orbit of the late 19th century at all. The convention of the diversity listing, pretending to offer a simple tally of items that passes as neutral and as universally applicable, carries out the reification of that long history and the powers that sustain it. After all, identity is not so much who we are, but an ongoing operation of power. That's why we can never quite take for granted the terms by which we become known to power. So rather than the quick list and the picture of diversity that it enshrines, we need sharp analyses of how, in very specific periods and specific places, in what Stuart Hall called conjunctures, particular sets of identities are enforced and distributed, articulated and disarticulated, reduced to each other or segregated. Power depends perhaps less on total exclusion than it does on canny, ever-adaptable games of divide and conquer, of good cop, bad cop, of various forms of extortion, playing off one minority against another, distinguishing the good minority from the bad one, promising you can be part of us on the condition that you throw someone else under the bus, and so on. The current homonationalist strategy has some striking consequences. For instance, if sexual freedom is now deployed to enforce the discrimination of migrants, as it is in the Netherlands, then precisely homophobia, if that still is what it is, can tragically emerge as a form of resistance. In that way, racial and sexual diversity can be said to add up, to make sense together on a shared list or in a series people are actively played out against each other. In Gaza, another example, because of Israel's aggressively homonationalist pinkwashing propaganda, identifying as gay might be conceived as jumping sides, as coming out as pro-Israel. So declare one identity and automatically get handed quite another. Then again, if current events in the US are any indication, and they usually are for us in the Netherlands, with a delay of 10 or 15 years, the homonationalist moment may already be over or over quite soon. A conditional and opportunistic inclusion may, of course, be withdrawn at any moment, making way for new strategies of inclusion and exclusion, for new distinctions between good and bad minorities, for new conflicts and polemics that are carefully prearranged by power. In any event, the diversity listing is not likely to help us predict or analyze how our identities will be redistributed in the coming conjuncture. Thank you for your patience.
What's happening?
Thank you so much, Murat. I just have to share one very short thought, and that's how categories like this can really fuck us up. It's such a mind fuck. It's such a mind fuck. I'm queer, but I'm black, but I can't be both. And it's so obvious, but it's so difficult to process that for yourself and to be confronted with that all the time. So I've talked about this with my friends, and we haven't figured it out. So thanks for sharing your thoughts. Please do.
I think if we know that we're mind-fucked, it's okay. I'm much more worried about people who are taking it more seriously.
True. Thanks for speaking. But Murat, is it true that that you have some time to maybe have a conversation with the people?
Of course.
Yeah?
Of course.
There you go. I got your back.
All the time in the world.
I got your back. Would anybody like to share some thoughts or questions for Murat? You can also respond to each other. Also, you can also shut each other down when you think that something that shouldn't be happening is happening. So help me in that, please, to keep this space as safe as we can. Please, I invite you to join the conversation.
Question. What do you intend to do, like you personally and then you within the context of a larger world, larger society, that sort of thing? What do you intend to do to make it better? Because past a certain point, just talking about diversity isn't going to fix it, because the situation still is what it is, particularly for queer people, particularly for queer people of color. There have been, a lot of attacks against trans women of color in Holland recently. So you see where the trend is going towards the right. What can people do in a real and tangible and practical way to kind of push things forward?
I would also like to invite anybody who feels that they have practices or ideas around this to share them, but maybe first Murat.
Well, I think I'm not a fan of diversity at all. I hope that that's clear. I think there's bigger issues than diversity. Diversity is sort of the cop-out, the easy way out of thinking that should be the solution. It's much more complicated than that. And using your words, it's also a much bigger mindfuck of that. Now, of course, we have lived through certain sections of the gay movement and of the feminist movement as well, mainstream feminist movement, turning to the left, right, wishful thinking, turning to the right in great numbers, in majorities almost, and in the process of doing that, turning on other minorities. So that has happened. That is part of our recent history, and it's incredibly concerning and disconcerting, especially when you're old enough, like I am, to remember that there was a time not so long ago when everybody felt that these things belonged together, that gender and sexuality and race and class, that it was a package deal. You sign up to everything or you don't, right? And that's now almost completely gone. That's destroyed by the move to the right and the move to populism. And minorities are played off to each other in a horrible way. And yeah, it's very frustrated, and I don't know, I understand your appeal for a quick answer or for a practice that I don't have, other than constantly refusing that to be pro-woman or to be pro-gay needs to be anti-Muslim. Just fully refusing that quick game of playing of one minority to another. And at certain moments, it's a little bit less now. I think it's almost as if other interests now are becoming more and more important. But only a few years ago, that was so demanding that you would almost declare your loyalty pro-woman and pro-gay by saying that you wanted less Muslims in the country. You almost had to prove your mettle as somebody who was real in that game. So was particularly frustrating, and I hope I've always also insinuated that for those mainstream white women and gays who thinking that they are fully established as an accepted minority, that may only last so long. Who knows? As I was saying, as was happening in the US, that had its own homonational moment, and now many groups are quickly to turn on the gays and the lesbians and trans people as well, in big numbers. So what may seem a successful inclusion or emancipation at one moment may end up very badly the next. So you can never quite, I don't understand what happened in the Netherlands, but you can never quite trust power to give you a warm welcome if that is at the cost of somebody else. Because then you know you could be next. The equation could be reversed the next round. I've not answered your question. I'm sorry. But I hope I've shared my desperation in finding an answer to that.
Does anybody want to share thoughts, respond to this? There are mics around. Okay. You're like in a thoughtful mood. You want to listen. I like you. I like you all. Thank you so much, Murat. Thank you so much. Okay, so now it truly is time for Zinzi. This way around, baby. Oh, you want to go the other way around. So I'm just going to remind you, just in case you forgot, who Zinzi is. Zinzi Mainot's work focuses on the relationship between dance, bodies, and politics. Strongly identifying as a dancer, she seeks to complicate the boundaries of dance and the place of black female bodies within the form. Thank you. Welcome.
All right. Let me just check I got Okay, take two. I'm gonna wear my scarf this time. You had my outfit the first time. This place is cold, okay? So, my name is Zinzi Minot, as said. And I'm a dancer, and I always open by saying that I say that very clearly because I find myself in spaces that are not made for dance. I'm interested in meddling and expanding the notions of dance within my own thinking and those who interact with my work. Because of that, it means I work with other mediums to shift the relationship to my body and other people's bodies. I make dance for stage, gallery, screens, museums, and I utilize sound to do that, sometimes on my own, sometimes in collaboration. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give you like a speedy package about my work, and then I'm gonna talk about my work in relation to this collection. So I'm interested in the relationship between dance and politics. That's where I play around. I'm interested in how bodies are racialized, sexed, gendered, queered, and classed, and how we read that on a moving body. And how I might use those notions to disrupt things that I want to discuss and things that I'm interested in. So I'm particularly interested in Black and queer dance aesthetics, how you look and see a Black dancing body, a queer dancing body, why that is happening, and then how I can play with that to have a conversation. And I'm interested in making work about those experiences and speaking to them with the intention of using my skill set to contribute to a politic about those lives. So I guess it's important for me to explain that I use my dancing, that my skill set to be active and to contribute to discourse, yeah? And I'm passionate and really believe in dance's ability to be used for the betterment of the multiple communities that I'm from, and how dance is used as a political tool of resistance and a way to discuss and build identities and communities. So this is an image from one of my recent pieces of work called What Kind of Slave Would I Be? It's a 45-minute dance piece, film, and the score is by a composer, producer, and DJ called Nkisi from Non-Collective. It's a time-traveling dance piece, politicizing the act of remembering, interrogation, of having slave ancestry from my personal perspective, which I should place myself as a Black British millennial. And I'm trying to use that gaze to have a conversation about slavery and complicate the idea of remembering slavery from this point, as opposed to being something that's just affecting the past. Some more images. That's me zoning out. The first time I saw that picture, I was quite terrified, because obviously I was there, and then I saw that, and it was terrifying. And that's another picture. So with that in mind, we're in an ethnographic institution, and I naturally gravitated to the afterlives of slavery, which is upstairs, and Wayne spoke about that as well. And it's an exhibition that I feel is trying to complicate and politicize the act of remembering. So that's my zone, I can sit there. And the exhibition connects slavery to the contemporary moment and asks the viewer, what would your role have been? What kind of slave would you be? What kind of master would you be? The exhibition further highlights and politicizes the Black body, whether that's through resistance or resilience, acts of performance, and so on. Right. So one of the things that I think is interesting about the exhibition is how the dehumanizing act of enslaving other people then comes to impact the construction and the images of their ancestors, aka me, in the focus of the exhibition. So what I'm interested in is looking at how these notions, specifically notions of the body for our current conversation, and how parts of the body become gendered and have an impact on the cultural expression and cultural production of many Black communities. So stay with me, because these are new thoughts and ideas I'm having in relation to this collection, so I'm riffing as well. So we'll go on a little journey and we see where we get. So. Okay. So I got quite interested in this part of the exhibition. And we can see that there is a reference to tambu, a musical genre and dance from Curacao, which is a mix of, broadly speaking, West African and Central African music, dance styles, music styles, and rituals. The connection to Africa as a continent is what shrouded the genre in and made it problematic within its context. Between 1936 and 52, the dance and other expressions of tambu were strictly prohibited, and the dances were described as lewd and erotic by the Catholic Church. Now, the language and sexualization and projection on the body movements of the hips function quite specifically in a dance context for me, in terms of how I'm investigating and doing my research. The hypersexualization of gender and gendering of the black body and the black female body resulting from slavery and, more relevant to our current thinking, the pelvis, the hip and the buttock area specifically contribute to the misunderstandings of African diasporic dance and those body movements. Namely, that the movement of these areas are sexual, they're always sexual, and that black people are more sexualized in their cultural dance practices, more free, and have mystical sexual powers. Further, the continual obsession over the black woman's buttocks, from the Hottentot Venus, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, to Venus Williams, means that the ways in which both movements are seen as a sign of promiscuity, sexual openness, availability, and something for the daring to try. There is also a tendency to gender the buttocks and its sexual power towards black women, which means the use of this body by men is generally ignored. And this assessment then causes women to be perceived as subservient, and a further hypersexualization of black women then encourages black men to be seen as hyper-aggressive. Where are we? On the other hand, black men are not seen to move in these ways frequently within the mainstream presentation of these movements, which we'll see in a little later. And finally, the African and diasporic individuals that are queer, gender non-conforming, and or trans, and the ways in which their existences have been heavily a part of the African continent's communities are just ignored. And the heteronormative assessment of gender in the African diasporic movement becomes prevalent, right? So I'm gonna show you some clips that I think you can see very clearly what's happening. So we're going to get those up. Nope. It's not in the PowerPoint. You're just revealing my big reveal now. Yeah, you're ruining it. I think behind you. You didn't see that. Can you play all three? There were four, but yeah. Thank you. And one more, yeah. So there was a fourth video, which ironically wouldn't play, and I say ironically because it was of a group of white women dancing, and it was there as comparison, and it wouldn't load. So I just need you to pop that, yeah? And hold that little ancestral interference there. So the reason why I show those 3 videos, so they're on my Twitter, and I use Twitter a lot to try and find images. Well, I just collect videos of dance, and people send me images and videos of dance, right? And for me, they're really interesting because there's a way in which people are using their hips and their pelvis and their waist that is within their context, which is not being sexualized and which is not being consumed in a particular way, which my cultural experience is familiar with. But when I see those dances being put in the mainstream, I have no relationship to what I'm actually watching. So I think for people who are familiar with that from their own cultural context, that might make a lot of sense. Maybe not, but for other people, you might ask, why use the hips then? Okay, so what is the African diasporic obsession with the hips? So I have some very dancey assessments of what that might be, right? So the first thing is weight and control. Now, the pelvis, along with the head, are the heaviest parts of the body. Now, anyone who is trained in dance knows that the control of the pelvis and the head are key to being a skilled dancer. First thing. The second thing, mastery and virtuosity. The pelvis has a large range of movement that can be chosen. And as well as being difficult to control and articulate, the movement of the pelvis is rarely set, unlike the feet. So what this means is that any dancer can show their skill either through duration or sustained movement of their pelvis, which is cardiovascularly taxing, and also demonstrate a range of movement and display personal skill and flair. Whilst holding the steps in their feet, they can keep this going, and this is theirs, right? But they'll just hit the timing on the feet and own the music. And this is something that you see happening often. Finally, and I think for me this is most interesting in terms of my relationship to music, is syncopation and polyrhythm. Now, given that syncopation and polyrhythm are native to African countries and are not readily found in Western contexts, you do not need to multiply the body parts used in dance to demonstrate musical skill in the same way. So what you find in a lot of African countries and diasporic dancers that are considered to be skilled and perceived to be skilled by a broad context of people is that they're capable of holding multiple rhythms on multiple body parts. So you will find dancers holding a 4/4 on the feet, a triplet on the hips, a 6/8 on the arms, and so on and so on. And that is what will be perceived as skill. So for me, then there is a logic in terms of the relationship to the music and the body parts used, why that might be happening within a diasporic context. And for me, that's mad exciting. This quote is in the video upstairs. I'll read it out. I'll do it like this. Europeans were here, and you see how they describe tambu in their literature. They say the movement is very sexual, indecent, but that is not accurate. It was because of the lack of knowledge. They do not know tambu dance. It is a dance that comes from the pelvis and the waist. The movements are natural, not sexual. It's a form of dance. Now, thinking about how black bodies have been gendered and sexualized as a result of slavery then allows us to look at the dance and the wider cultural production of African diasporic communities in a more complex way, and in a way that I think is interesting and directly impacts the way I make work and what I choose to do with my body and how I choose to place that body or not. So the last slide is of is in the exhibition. Can you play this, please? And you can see the dance in the video, which is why I'm playing it. It's got no sound? No? Okay. Cool. So it's not the greatest video because I'm DIY and I did it on my phone yesterday. Oh, I've lost my presentation. Should have one more slide. Do I not? Yeah, it's just that one. I was just trying to be polite. Thank you.
You want to hang around? Yeah? Cool. Thank you so much. I just want to share that there are some people in this room that I did a twerk shop with, twerk workshop, and it was pretty intense, pretty liberating, because I've got a big ass. I know you've noticed. and it's loaded, not only with, me, but also with lots of ideas. So it was a lot of like working on all of these things that you mentioned, like the shame that's there, the sexualization that other people are projecting onto me, and then what do I do with it? And it was a great way to take that back and to access a body, part of my body that I felt was, that sometimes I didn't even want to associate with, that I felt was only a burden. So, and super, super sexual in a way that I didn't have control over. So that was really, as a black femme, that was a very, very revolutionary moment for me. Thank you for offering your thoughts with us. And for going out on a limb, because I know that it wasn't,
New thoughts.
New thoughts. That's special. I would like to, again, give you the room and the space and the time to share your thoughts. I would like to especially invite the black people and people of color first to share your reflections or maybe questions for Zinzi, or maybe some more questions and thoughts for Murat, or maybe some reflections on the poem, whatever you want. Yes.
Oh, two.
Can you just hold on until the mic gets to you, please? Thank you so much.
All right. This is where the come from. Yeah, I found it. I found you really interesting because I'm from Curacao, and this is not decolonizing your mind is also like the way you perceive music and stuff like that, and that was like really tough for me because I'm from Curacao, and then these kind of dance were like, of course, tambu was like you said, it was not how do you say that? It was illegal to dance tambu. So all these things were passed on by us seeing it as as something vile, as something that you shouldn't be. So it's like it's kawa. That's how we call it in Curacao. It's like so it's something really interesting to see this connection being made because it's not often made, even though like some people know about it, not everyone knows about it. So it's really interesting to see, and like the connection between hips and
Cool.
It was nice.
Thank you. I'm glad because I knew that you were from Curacao, and when you put your hand up, I was like, it could go bad. Oh, thank you.
There was another person that you noticed?
Just here.
Yeah, I also wanted to thank you as well, because it was very interesting for me. I'm from Jamaica, and so I think our dance form tends to be one that is seen as hypersexualized. And so just recently, I was at a friend, wow, this is making me nervous. I was at I was at a friend's.
Do you want to just hold it?
Do you mind?
Just take it. Yeah, just have it. It's yours.
Sorry. I was at a friend. There was a Surinamese maroon dance that was being done for a friend, and I was just looking at the movement of the hips, movement of the bottom as well, and I was just thinking that, within that, this is not a sexual dance at all, and how it is that a lot of Jamaican dance forms are sexualized, but that's also about sexuality and sex, and also being made evil when it doesn't need to be. So I think that it's double also when something isn't sexual on one hand, and then also on the other hand that if it is sexual, how is that included in sort of like everyday culture, and just this is a part of life and shouldn't necessarily be seen as a bad thing. So thank you.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it's difficult because sex is a part of life, and what I think it is possible is for someone to hear me speak and then try and completely desexualize black body and say, no, they're just all doing spiritual dances, right? And the way this kind of can flip-flop, and before you know it, someone's just talking another pile of shit, basically. And it's not that, it's that we are not taught, and we're not taught to, and we struggle to see because of how we're perceived and how we're taught to perceive ourselves, that everything that we do isn't sexualized, because this is a gaze. This isn't our decision about the movements, and at some point it's getting fed back to you, so then you think it's your culture. And you're like, actually, I don't know, because like my grand died 2 years ago, and my whole family, like one of my aunts has had her leg amputated like 2 days before the funeral, and she was down on the floor at my grand's funeral, and nobody was thinking about sex. And I watched that, and I'm like, this is not about sex. Nobody's taught me to do that for sex, but there is a movement, and the hips aren't just for sex. Like, they have a function within the body, and that's kind of what I'm interested in trying to discover. I'm definitely discovering it. And it's a lot to do with the relationship between me and my family space, and seeing those movements in those spaces and wanting to understand them from there and not from anybody else. Yeah.
Do we maybe have a more complicated, because again, it's the categorization and the sort of like, this is sexual and this is not, or this is decent and this is not, and there are many there are many butt dances. I don't know what the dancey term is, but
I don't have one.
Butt dances
It's
in
now butt
Somali
dance.
culture, you know, where I'm from.
Yeah.
So and it's mainly amongst women that I know of. I don't know how it used to be, you know, but and then. I'm sure that there is this admiration for each other, and there is a different type of. I feel that it is sensual. It's a more. I feel like it's a more complicated relationship to the body and to sexuality, and definitely it can be sexual. I mean, women amongst each other can be sexual, but I feel like, you know, it's also this thing about sexual being only heterosexual and sexual only being between a man and a woman in the private
house,
sphere. You know.
And I think maybe on top of that, or to sit with that is this thing about skill. So I think what I don't like, it's the conversations that okay, I'm a dancer, I'm a black dancer, I did ballet and contemporary and all that kind of stuff, and I'm a good jumper, right? Because black people are athletic, but I was never told I was feminine. And it's these kind of stereotypes around the body. So it might be sexual, but it's also really hard. There is a skill set and there's a virtuosity that never gets spoken about. So I was just a natural jumper, rather than the fact that I was training my ass off and going to the gym after school and stretching every day. I was just a good jumper because I was black. And yeah, I'm black and I'm like a kick-ass jumper, but also I was working very hard. And I think these are where the stereotype then removes any discipline or skill or virtuosity. And when you can't get into the institution, then your family party is a training zone.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what I'm seeing is my family are training in parties, and they're acquiring a skill that everybody can't. I cannot do what my aunt does. I cannot do it.
I feel you so much. I feel you so much. Is there anybody else who would like to? Yes, Mandla.
I can't hear you, my love. I'm sorry.
I wonder because when I was younger, here in the Netherlands, me amongst my friends, my black friends, we would during school breaks dance with each other, and we would not allow boys. I wonder, because, you know, for us it was just a thing, just exactly like Hodan mentioned. You know, we were dancing, having fun, and just amongst us, it was definitely sensual, but it wasn't sexual. And I wonder, do you, or have you seen similar coping mechanisms to I don't think we were conscious of this, but to not just have this hassle as it being made something else.
I mean, I think in a professional context, no, but in growing up, especially before I came out and I was in a lot of straight clubs, there were dances I wouldn't do. There were definitely decisions about how I was using my body that related definitely to how I dressed, that what I would have let myself do. And I think part of the reason why I'm thinking about this now is because I've realized I've stopped doing certain things. And because of the attention that I get, like I too have a big bum, and people love to talk about it and touch it and walk up to it in the street like it has its own life, and you know, and it doesn't have anything to do with me, and actually it's attached to me, and when people hit it, it hurts. Like, and because of like trying to navigate that, I realized that I lost skills. So when I was at my grand's funeral, I actually couldn't do what my aunts were doing, and I've actually not been doing it for a while. And I think people are making decisions like that within club spaces, which I don't think are any less of spaces, because of the relationship to how their body are interacted with, especially around this whole blow up of twerking. So now you can be in a public space and you have hundreds of people twerking around you and pointing at you saying, go, 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 go. That's for me, a very uncomfortable place to be. And I've seen a lot of people stop. I still dance in my bedroom. And that's what, I think there may be more of the coping strategies that I've seen and also taken part in. Yeah.
So maybe one last...
one last one. My voice is dry.
Would anybody like to offer up a thought or has a question? Okay. Thank you so much, Cynthia.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for everybody who shared their experiences and thoughts. I know this is not an easy place to do that in, and I really am happy with the conversation that we're having tonight. We're going to go on to the final part of the evening. Barbie Asante will present a ritualized performance presentation. Barbie is a London-based artist, curator, educator, and occasional DJ. I've danced to some of her tunes that she selected, and it was amazing. Her work is concerned with the politics of place, space, identity, and the histories and legacies of colonialism, making work that is collaborative, performative, and dialogic. She has created works that consider migration, safe spaces to gather in cities, antagonistic to one's presence, and how one maps the self as a contributor to narratives of society, culture, and politics. Barbie is currently undertaking a PhD at the University of Westminster. Please help me welcome Barbie.
Do I have a clicker?
Her name is Monica Amakifia, which means Kingmaker, a very appropriate name for a beauty queen. Her official title is Miss Ghana, and she's arriving at London Airport for a 12-day visit to Britain. And who better to show Monica the sights of London than Miss Great Britain, Iris Waller. In her own country, Miss Ghana is a seamstress, so naturally she would like to visit one of London's fashion houses. Preferably fashions which she doesn't get a chance to look at in Africa, like this 1,000-pound mink bolero shown by expert Mr. Deanfield. A little warm for the tropics, but it feels good in London. And now for a call at Asprey's, for diamonds sparkle all the world over. And when jurors display their wares so invitingly, they know what they're doing. Miss Ghana decides she likes London indoors or out, and London's glad to welcome a very charming representative of a brand new country.
This is a painful declaration of independence. Amma wrote herself a poem, a declaration of independence. Oh, my dear brother, the decision to sever and separate was not based on the knowledge of me as a forever dreamer, unable and incapable of finding the clear world of take and take and take. As always, a painful declaration of independence. For Amma. For me. The problem, dear friend, dear comrade, is not that I am a woman and you are a man, or at least not only that, or that you come from a different quarter of the village, the town, the district, the region, the country, the continent, the earth. The problem was never that I am black and you are white, or not only that. And as much as I wish I had 2 whole legs, like you, plus a half, and given my life, I could have even done with an extra arm. A 3rd eye that saw not just into me, but you and others and things. I could have loaned you a little fat too, to help you through those cold mornings at Hamatan and the even more colder nights of your winter. Friend, height was not missed much, except when I needed to reach the upper shelves of my existence, from where I would want, occasionally, to bring down my forgotten hopes, aspirations, plans, and projects to be dusted. When I would wish fondly that I had one such as you around, with the long arm that could elegantly reach for the treetops to pick the ripest and most succulent successes from the skies. Oh, my dear brother, the decision to sever and separate was not based on the knowledge of me as a forever dreamer, unable and incapable of handling the clear world of take and take and take, while you could comprehend the motions of survival and move with the speed of a hare in a burning grassland. I am cutting loose, my dear, for only one reason. I do not know where else you go, whom else you meet when we part. I've had to learn that these other associations live. The connections are there and tight. The commitments are real. The allegiances binding, and the reverberations from them have a way of coming at me, shaking my foundations, affecting me negatively. I have nightmared of different gatherings after we had parted, where too you sit at centre stage, where they call up names to censure, characters to assassinate, plot our undoings. And you do not say anything. You do not own up to knowing me well, or our comradeship, and what I thought was our mutual understanding. So, my dear, my love, I am gone. I am through. I cannot show up for the meeting tonight, or any other night, anywhere, ever again. No, my dear, my friend, I cannot show up tonight. I won't be there. I am gone. This is another declaration of independence for the women who contribute to me, inspire me, keep me alive, my mothers, lovers, sisters, cousins, daughters, comrades. This is for Ajua, Araba, Nana, Amal, Ancestress, Deborah, Buki, Phoebe, Basti, Sammy, Teresa, Kat, Labita, Chandra, Samya, Simone, Delane, Imani, and for Amma, for Claudia, for Catherine, for Sarah, for Angela, for Bidisha, for Naya, for Anne, for Avta, and for Karen, and for the ones who have left us, for Gloria, for Bessie, for Papuza, for Charlotte, for my grandmother, Abba, Dinah, Quantzma, Edwin Bading, who died 1 year ago, singing praises to the Lord after 102 years of living. And for my friend and sister, Khadija Say, and her mother, Mary Mende, and for all those dead and missing and devastated by the hideous crime that we know as the Grenfell Tower fire.
A poem by ancestors. They buried me alive, censored, silenced me, told me too many tiny lies, at just the right times attempted to taint my very identity. And of course, in my reaction, in my telling of the truth, I see how I could have made it all true, coming within a fraction of turning into you. How ironic they buried me alive. But I didn't die. I stayed in the ground and I turned into land. And here I stay, my roots expand, and here I play with fruits and grand piles of the shit that people say, while I stand in the corner, no room to back away. I land ever more often, while they stand where once was rotten. And their shame stays holding the shovel that they call a spade at the top of my undead grave, looking now down, never to see me, not truly, not sane, not in the eyes, not in their brains. It's not the same. They buried me. Simply not for singing their songs, not for bowing to their claims, for praising their wrongs, not disregarding their needs for shame. I still hear it through dirt and rocks and bugs. They tried to bury me again and again, throwing pieces of my body into graves they dug. I don't know how they live with themselves. I don't want to. I won't let go. I won't hold on to. So they buried me alive and unwilling. But I survived every killing. And I looked around and I saw millions like me. Millions of women buried in shame by those so willing to forget, so willing to collect the bounty on their heads, and they lay in our beds and we repay their debts. Don't bury me, I said, don't bury me. But they only buried me more before they danced on my grave, and I looked and I saw so many more, unafraid. So many women, so many shades. I decided to exhale my lungs to become the cave. No longer a slave, but release. Now they bury my teeth separate, my hands, heart and feet. But even if I breathe, even if my breath should cease, I will still exist. And even if my body is rotting, turning cold and hot again, heart stopping and unstopped, I am unburied. In the whispers of the old people before me, buried in the mixture of the blood and waters that bore me, buried in the sacred Creator's reign, so I don't mind being buried and buried and buried again, because I am not the other, to the mother where life came, and even as my daughters of many slaughters, still I remain, for the fire was always burning far beneath the flames, so bury me again with your myths and your names, for our planet is woman and buried in pain, but still we rise again and again, and the stolen sacred objects can never be tamed. No matter how much you dig them up or bury or slain, still we remain. Still we remain. Woman, other, mother, buried remains, still
we remain. I walked barefoot at the opening of the Diaspora Pavilion with a basket full of candles with these words from Angela Yvonne Davis handwritten on them. Freedom is a constant struggle. The palazzo filled with those privileged to make it to the opening week of the Venice Biennale, and us artists with our sister, Khadija. We declared independence, not as nation. We declared autonomy over our bodies, our words, our histories, our traces, elevated to objects of ritual, remembering, and archaeology of black memory. Sankofa. I speak in the tongues of my mother and my grandmothers before her. Although I do not know the words, my very being is evidence of those languages. It is in these words that I will speak. It is in these words that I will create. It is in these words that I will question. I question this place, a diaspora place, as an ideal narrative of my relationship to my internal migratory roots, as the distance between becomes more apparent as we get to second, third, and fourth generations removed from motherlands. How do I map myself in this place? My family, the people that left and arrive and continue to arrive, even though they make borders, make checkpoints, and build walls. The process of making is enacting my presence, the hard navigation of presences, absences, visibility, invisibility. Navigating, finding roots. Arranging traces of memory from archives that will never be constituted. Entering spaces without invitation, or spaces that have an antagonistic or conditional invitations, time-limited invitations, invitations by special arrangement, presence as a performance of a kind of sociability that explains a connection but keeps you outside, always arriving, never settled. The need becomes urgent, utterances become words, sounds, whispers, shouts. The need to collect, assemble, activate the stories, the narratives, undo the knowledges, the what is known, to make something visible. It's not going. These things, technology. Oh? What's happened to my presentation? This just like messes up the ritual energy, right? The need becomes urgent. Utterances become words. Sounds, whispers, shouts. The need to collect, assemble, activate the stories, the narratives, undo the knowledges. The what is known, to make something visible. It's not working. This might mean me doing something that I probably don't do very much, because the way to do this is to actually sing it to you. Don't let me down. Don't let me down. Don't let me down. Don't let me down. Nobody ever loved me like you do. Oh, you do. You do me good. And if somebody ever loved me like you do, yes, you do. You do me good. Don't let me down. Don't let me down. Don't let me down. Don't let me down. In the clear and critical light of day, illusionary administrators whisper of our need for institutions, and all institutions are political, and all politics is correctional. So it seems we need correctional institutions in the common, settling it, correcting us. But we won't stand corrected. Moreover, incorrect as we are, there is nothing wrong with us. We don't want to be correct, and we won't be corrected. Politics proposes to make us better, but we're good already in the mutual debt that can never be made good. We owe it to each other to falsify institutions, to make politics incorrect, to give the lie to our own determination. We owe each other the indeterminate. We owe each other everything. Thank you.
Wow, I love the song. I love the song. So, this is the end of the evening, and it was a special evening, wasn't it? Thank you, two fans. But no, I'm sure you all agree. It was a beautiful night, and I hope that you go away and sleep on it and think on it, and I hope that you feel strengthened in your own journeys to undo and to redo and to find your own ways around these categories, sometimes to completely let them go, sometimes to just, imbue them with new meaning. I especially like to thank all the Black people and people of color that came, the queer Black people, the queer people of color. Thank you so much for coming. And especially also thank you to all the white people here that want to undo white supremacy, because that's a thing and it's really important to do. I would like to thank the organizers of tonight, Amal, Damiana, Wayne, Hidde, Arnoud, and Rita. Without them, we wouldn't have come together and shared these amazing thoughts, heard these amazing speakers. So a round of applause for the organizers. Also, all of you got the long paper sticks. That's actually a printed version on a huge poster of Maria Guggenbichler's poem, We Ghosted You a Long Time Ago. Please take it. If you feel like you want to do that, please read it. It's actually a longer version of the poem that we read. If you are not into that kind of thing, then give it away to somebody you really like. Also, the 9th and the 10th of December, it's going to be the same organizers of the team is going to organize the weekend of global culture here. So keep an eye out on the Facebook page. If you feel like you want to continue working on these topics and the idea of declassification, decategorization, then you can email rcmc@wereldculturen.nl. If you don't know, just come to me and I'll tell you again what the email address is, and just sign up for the workshop. It's going to be a workshop on gender and the collection and how to look at those things differently. No date yet, but if you're interested, please let us know. I think that's it. The cafe is closed, so we're just going to move quietly and slowly towards the exit. And I thank you all for coming tonight.